Hello there. I'm going to show you how to do my hat in my double and joist stitch. It's going to be a slouchy hat, and the double and joist stitch is coming up here, and it's a little bit more of a lacy hat, so more of a decorative hat. And I'm using this brim, and this brim is my Twisted Thistle brim. I really like it as a brim. But it looks nice in all kinds of patterns as a blanket. It can do just about anything, this stitch. Okay, so the yarn I'm using is King Cole Riot Chunky, and this is the color of it. It's got a lot of really pretty pinks and reds and grays in it, and it is a chunky yarn, and it is wool, 30% wool, 70% acrylic. Okay. Oh, and the shade is called Juniper Berry. Okay. So that's the yarn. And the loom hook I'm using, this one is from Steve Axelrod, and I'll give you a link to his Etsy store. Okay, and the loom I'm using is a Cindy Wood loom, 5/8 inch gauge. This one has 42 pegs. Most people will have about a 44 or more pegs in a 5/8 inch gauge for a hat. This is a smaller adult hat. And so we'll get going, and I already have a video of the cast on and the brim, so I'll take you there so that we can catch up, and then I'll show you how to do this stitch. Okay, so we will see you in a bit. Well, hi there. I'm going to show you how to make a brim in my Twisted Thistle stitch. And the yarn I'm using is, I love this chunky yarn in Saturn's Rings color. And this is the loom hook I'm using, and they have very similar ones on Etsy. Okay, so I have the chunky yarn, which is bulky. I have a Cindy Wood loom, and it is a 5/8 inch gauge, and it's a small hat loom. And so let's just get started. Okay, so the first thing I do is make a slip knot, and I just make an easy slip knot. I just twist it and push the yarn through like that, and then I put that on the first peg. Okay, so then once I've done that, and here's the short piece of yarn behind, this is a crochet chain cast on I'm going to use. I put the loom hook in the loop, and I scoop up a loop of yarn. I can put down my loom hook at this point, and then all we do is we take that loop and put it behind the next peg, and I'm going to make sure that this peg is nice and tight, this yarn, so I'm going to pull it, and I'm going to pull the yarn through like that, take the loop behind, put the yarn through, snug it up, put it behind the next peg, yarn through, snug it up, behind the next peg, yarn through, snug it up. Now you can control how big the loop is just by pulling that. Okay, so behind the next peg and snug it up, behind the next peg, snug it up, and you just do that all the way around the loom. So I'm just going to pause it because you don't need to watch all that, and we will catch up when we get close to the end. Okay, I'm nearing the end here, so we just keep going, and I'm just going to put it on the next peg and knit it over, and then to close this loop, I'm going to take the yarn from behind, this little piece of yarn from behind where I cast on, and I'm just going to knit it over here like that and tighten it, and then I'm ready to start. It just gives us a little bit of yarn here and helps to get this one a little bit more secured now and keep it tight. Okay, so now that we've cast on, we're going to do a row of U-knit, or U-wrap it's also called. So we knit that off, go around in a U, knit this one off, and we just do a row of U-wrap. This is all to complete the cast on. Okay, so again, we'll catch up at the end of the row and I will see you there. Okay, so I've gone all the way around. Now I'm going to do a row of purl. So I just dip my loom hook in the loop and pull the working yarn from the bottom through and up, and then flip the loop on. So loom hook, scoop it up, take the loop, lift it off the peg, and then slip it back on like that and snug it up. Okay, just like that. Snug it up. And snug it up. Okay, so we just do the row of purl. Okay, and then I will just meet you up when I get close to the end. Okay, and I'm just going to do the last one in the row here. Okay, now that we've done that, we do a row of knit again. So we do a row of U-knit, or U-wrap it's called. And then we will catch up at the end again. So we'll see you again. Okay, and I'm just going to knit the last peg in the row. And then we do a row of purl, and that's it. We've finished the cast on, and it will be a nice edge that won't curl up on you. Okay, so now a row of purl. Okay, so I'll just meet you up at the end of the row. Okay, I've completed that last row of purl, and now we're ready to go into the stitch that's in the brim. So it's a 2-row stitch. First row is going to be my roses and chain stitch. So how we do that is we put the working yarn over in a U-wrap and knit it off. Come back the opposite way in a U-wrap, knit it off, and then back again going forward and knit it off. And you'll be able to see it better on this pink peg. Go over in a U-wrap, knit it off. Now when we're coming back, we don't want to be too tight, because if you're too tight, it's going to go like that and you're going to have a hard time getting it. So you just want to drape it over, knit it off, come back, knit it off. So there'll be 3 knits on a peg. So knit, come back over in a U-wrap, knit it off, come back again, knit it off. Really, really easy stitch. Gives you lots of texture. I have a video on just the roses and chain stitch. It's a nice stitch all on its own. So it's on my channel. Okay, so you see how easy this is? You just go over, knit it over, come back, knit it over, come back again, knit it over. So U-wrap over the opposite way, U-wrap back the way we're going. And you just whip along, and because you're putting 3 stitches on a peg, your work is really growing. If you look at it here, you can see it's come in really long compared to over here where it's tight on the loom. Puts a lot of work on. And the reason I call it roses and chains is you can probably already see the little kind of rose looking pattern here from doing it. Looks like roses chained together. Okay, so knit, knit, and knit. Knit, knit, and knit. And it should be easy to knit over. If it gets too hard to knit over, you're knitting too tight. So just loosen up a bit. Just drape it over. Don't have to pull tight at all. You just drape it over, and drape it over. Okay, so I will meet you up at the end of the row again. Okay, and I'm just doing the last peg in the row. Okay, now the next row is just U-wrap. So that's the stitch. 1 row of roses and chains, 1 row of U-wrap, repeat. Now, the thing is, when you go from a stitch that has 3 knits on it, that's so big, to a stitch that has a little knit, even when you're doing garter stitch and you go from knit to purl, what you have is a jog. And that means there's a difference between this stitch, and you notice it. So this would become the back of the brim or the back of the hat. But to make it so there's less of a jog, what we're going to do is put 2 knits on here. So I'm just going to U-wrap it, come around and U-wrap this one again, just this one, so that there's less of a jog. Okay? And then we're just going to U-knit all the way around. And when we get back, I'll show you how to help this not to be such a big jog when we switch from the other stitch too. So we're just going to U-wrap all the way around. So I will meet you up again at the end. Okay, I'm nearing the end. So I do my U-wrap here, and then I'm going to do my U-wrap here. But now we're going into the roses and chains, so we're going to be going into a stitch that has a lot of loops on it. So on this peg, that for the transition, so it won't be as big a jog, I'm just going to go around like this to the front, knit it off again, and then go into the stitch. So knit, come back over, knit, and come back over, and U-knit. Okay, U-knit, come back over, and U-knit again, and we'll just take a look at the transition in a second here. I think we have enough, we'll be able to see a little something. Okay, so here's the stitch starting, and here's where we did the transition. Here's where we went from one stitch to the other, and you don't see a very big jog. We minimized it, so you don't see much difference there. But we'll look at it as we go more along. Okay, so that was the way when I did, I checked it and did it a bunch of times to get it so that it would have the least jog possible, and that's what I came up with. Okay, so now you know how to do that, and you know how to work with the jog both ways. So you just keep going now. 1 row of U-wrap, 1 row of roses and chains until you get as long as you want to go. Now, depending what stitch you're going to go into might make the difference of which row, which stitch you end with. If you're going into a stitch that has a lot of work to it, you might want to go directly from roses and chains. If you're going into a stitch that's just simply one knit on a peg, then what you're going to want to do is end it with the row of U-wrap. So that's entirely up to you which row you end on. So you just keep going, and we'll go for a while and take a look at it when we get it to the length we want. I never usually do a brim smaller than an inch. I usually like them more closer to 1.5 inches and sometimes even 2 inches. But however long you like your brim is how long to go. So we'll see you in a bit when we get more done. Okay, so I've done far enough that you can see how this is looking. And this is what it looks. It gives you just this really nice, tight, textured brim. So it's nice and warm. It has lots of texture. And we can just, when you get to the length you want, then you start into the rest of the hat. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed how the brim is, and the hat will be coming with this brim. And until next time, bye. Okay, so now that you've got the brim the length you want, and it doesn't matter which row you ended at, because either row will be just fine to go into the next part. So the next part, double enjoy, is a 2-row stitch. So the first thing we're going to do is a row of E-wrap. So E-wrap is just wrapping around like that, and I usually just do about 3 at a time. I don't like to see laddering with E-wrap. So I usually just do around 3 at a time. And we just E-wrap. That's our first row. So very easy. This is one of the reasons I called it Double Enjoy. It's got 2 stitches in it, and it's just so much fun to do this fast. So I'm doing 4. After I say I do 3 at a time, sometimes I do 4, just whatever. I just don't do the whole loom. But if you're one of the people that does the whole loom and you don't have any problem with laddering, go ahead, you can do that. But you've got to always stop and start in exactly the same place when you do this stitch. So take that into account. Now this stitch works best on an even pegged loom, but if you have an odd pegged loom, you can still make it work. Because the next stitch is done in a group of 2 that you always use. What you do with the extra peg that you had at the end is you would just give it another E-wrap, and it would be in the back of the hat. And it's a slouch hat, so it'd be completely covered. So no problem if you have an odd loom. Okay, so that's the first row. It's E-wrap. Now, for the second row, we do the E-wrap in 2 stitch. So what we're going to do is we're going to wrap. This is number 1 peg, number 2. We're going to wrap 1 and 2 together, 3 and 4 together, 5 and 6 together. We're always going to wrap the same ones together. So I don't ever get them mixed up. I always wrap the whole loom. So we're going to wrap the first 2 together, then the next 2. There's 3 and 4, then 5 and 6. We're just E-wrapping around them. The next 2, 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 the next 2. And you notice I'm just pushing the yarn down a bit as I'm doing this to make a nice loop on top to knit off. And the last 2 will always be these last 2. If for some reason it isn't the same last 2, you've done something wrong, unwrap it and do it right again. Okay, so I'm holding on to it and I'm just going to knit this one over, and this will secure it. So I can put the working yarn down, and then I'm just going to go around and knit them off. Okay, that's all there is to it. Pretty easy stitch. It makes it look more like a fancy stitch where you've had to do all kinds of techniques, and actually it's just 2 easy stitches. Those are my favorite to make something look like it took a lot more work and it's just easy stitches. It's a little bit of a weird angle. I sometimes run into problems, but I'm trying really hard to keep this in the camera and turn this as I'm doing it. Now, when you're coming back, and oh yeah, we already did these 2, right? So you're going to notice that your working yarn has been left here, and it's been left here because of the way we do that stitch. So we just pass it behind. This will always be your first stitch you E-wrap. Okay? So you just E-wrap it. And so it's always 1 row of the double E-wrap and 1 row of E-wrap. Repeat. So that's all you do. So we're just going to E-wrap. So I'm just going to put you on pause so you don't have to watch me go around the loom the whole time again. And we'll meet up at the end. I'll see you in a bit. Okay, so I'm just going to E-wrap the last peg here. And then you're going to come and do your double E-wrap again, wrapping all the same pegs. Okay, so that's all there is to it. 1 row of E-wrap, 1 row of the double E-wrap, and just keep doing that until you get it just about as long as you want to go. We're going to add on maybe a 1/2 inch more with the cast off or the bind off that we're going to do. So we're going to do a looser one that's really nice for slouchy hats. So we'll catch up then, and we will see you then. Have fun. Okay, so I've gone a lot further along, and I'm really liking the look of it. Maybe a really nice slouchy hat. You can see what it looks like. It's really pretty. And I've gotten as long as I want to get, because I'm going to put on a good 1/2 inch or even more if I choose by doing more rows of E-wrap. So before we do the reduced bind off we're going to do, we need to do at least 3 rows of E-wrap, and you can do up to 5 because this is so lacy. When we do the bind off, we want to have a nicer yarn there, and also for moving stitches, the E-wrap stitch is really good for that too. So we're just going to go around in an E-wrap for at least 3 rows and up to 5 if you'd like, and we will see you in a bit. Okay, now that I've got the rows of E-wrap that I want, I'm going to go ahead and bind off, and I'm going to take you to the bind off video because I already have a bind off video, and so I don't need to make another one, and then we'll catch up and have a look at the hat. So we will see you soon. Okay, so we're going to do a reduced brim on the hat. And so the first thing we do, and I've already done this, of course, is done the 1 row of E-wrap. So you can do this not just with this hat, but with any hat that you have that you want to do a reduced brim, so that it's not bulky, so it lays flatter, and it works especially nice on slouch hats. So whenever you do that, always do a row of E-wrap just before you start, no matter what stitch you are doing. And the reason for that is E-wrap is nice and loose, so it makes it easier to move stitches over. Okay, so that's the reason for that. So you do the row of E-wrap, and then we're going to start moving stitches to reduce. And it's a very easy reduction to get a flatter brim. We're going to count every 4 pegs. 1, 2, 3, 4. And on the 4th peg, we're just going to take it off the loom and then move it over to the peg before. So now you have 2 stitches on the loom. And number 4 is blank. And then you go 1, 2, 3, 4 again. You take the loom off, or the stitch off, and put it on the peg before. So now if we go from the beginning, we got 1, 2 pieces on here and a blank peg, 1, 2 pieces on here and a blank peg. And you're going to do that all the way around the loom. Every 4th, you're going to be moving over to the 3rd. When you get to the end, if it's not equally divisible, you'll have some extra loops with thread on, yarn on, that you can't move over, and that's okay. Leave them on. It's better to leave them on than to reduce too much. So I'll meet you back when we get all the way and that we reduced by moving every 4th peg onto the 3rd. So we'll see you in a few. Okay, so I've gone all the way around now, and I've moved them all over, and mine did turn out fairly even. I have just 3 here instead of 2. So that's all because it's not evenly divisible. Okay, so now what we're going to do is do another round of E-wrap, and how you do that is you E-wrap all the pegs that have yarn on them, knit them over, and with this one we take both loops over, then go behind any empty pegs and E-wrap the pegs that have yarn on them, taking the 2 off, skipping by going behind the empty peg, and then just E-wrapping. Okay, so you just do that all the way around the loom, and I will see you back at the beginning. Okay, so I've E-wrapped around the loom, and now we're going to do our next reduction. So we have the 3 pieces of yarn that are on the 3 pegs, and then on either side pegs with no yarn. So we're always going to be working with the ones that have yarn on them, and you're going to go 1, 2, 3, and you're going to take the yarn from number 2 now and move it over to number 1. And then on the next 3 peg grouping, you're going to do the same thing. Now on the first one I had 4 yarns, so here I'm going to just ignore the extra yarn here, and on 2 I'm just going to move it over to 1, like that. Okay, so you just go all the way around, taking the yarn from number 2 and putting it on number 1. It's a little awkward for me. And I'll meet you up when we have that all done. Okay, now that you've done that, you have yarn on every 2nd peg. So now we just E-wrap around, doing the same thing, going behind the pegs with no yarn and E-wrapping the pegs with yarn. Taking both loops over, going behind the ones with no yarn, and just E-wrapping. So I'll see you when you have that done. Okay, so you finished, and then all we're going to do now is take this yarn and put it around the loom, and then another half. We just want to make sure we have it long enough, and cut it, because we're all reduced, and now we're just going to take it off the loom. Whoops. That off there. So you just take a needle. You can use your loom hook also if you want. You don't have to have a needle. And I'm just going to thread the needle with the yarn. There, got it this time. There we go. And then all you're going to do is go around the loom and just scoop up that yarn and get it inside this. So we go up and we just scoop up that loop. Okay, so I will just meet you up when we've scooped up all the loops. Okay, and then just be sure you've picked up every single loop, and then go back into the first loop that you started with. Then you can just take your needle off. At this point, I'm just going to cut this a little bit smaller so it's easier to work with. And then take my loom hook, and I'm just going to start popping all these off the loom. You can even do it with your fingers. There, and it's off the loom. And then at this point, all we're going to be doing is drawing in the hat. So just draw it in a little ways, and then you're going to take the yarn and put it to the inside of the hat, although the inside of this hat looks really good too, just as good as the outside. Okay, and then you're just going to pull it closed until you get it all the way closed. Nice and tight. Now what I do is I hold it tight, and I usually go in and check and make sure that I've drawn it up evenly, and you can see that. So just a nice flattened brim. But now we can put the needle back on, cut this shorter again. Just save enough to sew it up and weave it in. And thread your needle. Okay, now I want to make sure that this is nice and tight so that we don't end up with a hole anywhere. And then I'm just going to put this through a couple of the yarns and make a knot. And I got that tail stuck in there. There we go. Just make a nice tight knot to hold it closed. And then you can see where the center was right there. And then I'm just going to sew around it. Now, if you were sure this was always going to be the inside of the hat, you could even just sew it across. But I'm going to sew around to keep it neat. for the reason that I might be using this side too. This hat is very nicely reversible, but it gives you that option. And I'm just going to sew around. And every once in a while, I'm just going to put a little knot on it. There, get that working yarn out of there and sewing around here. And then I'm just going to do another knot. I just wouldn't want it to ever come undone. And when you're sure you have the hat all very securely sewn, you just do another little knot and you are done. There we go. And then you can weave in the end of the yarn. I'm not going to bother doing that now, just to keep it there. Turn the hat to the other side, and there you go. You have a nice flat brim. See? Just flattens it out. It has a really nice little shape to it. If you laid it down like this, you can just see how nice and flat it is. Just an easy way to reduce your brim. And it's really great on slouchy hats. Okay, so now your hat's done, and I hope you like it as much as I like this one. And so here's how it looks. And of course it's got the nice slouchy drape and this 5-star type of pattern on the, and flat lined off. And so I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you enjoy making the hat. And until next time, bye.